wanna talk? So let's talk. Yeah. Talk. You wanna talk? You gotta talk, you need to talk. News talk.
I talk, you talk to Solomon. I talk, you talk to Solomon. Yeah, let's talk to Solomon. Talk to Solomon.
You gotta talk, you wanna
Good evening, everyone. Welcome to Talk to Solomon. I'm Stan Solomon. I'm the host.
I am Chief Steve Davis, the in-studio co-host.
And our other co-host from the great state of Alabama, Greg W. Howard. And Greg has two things to tell us. One, his website, and two, where you can listen to his program. Greg?
Hi, yes, my website is gregwhoward.com, and you can find me on Thursday nights on Blog Talk Radio on the Conservative Report. And we post a link to that the 2 days before the show off my Twitter account, which is Greg W. Howard.
All right, and of course, joining us tonight, as he does every Tuesday night, is our good friend, Dr. Alan Keyes. Alan, how are you this evening?
I'm doing pretty well, Stan. How are you?
I am fine. It's always nice to see your smiling face, and how you're still smiling, I don't know, but you got to count your blessings.
Good evening, Chief. How are you?
I'm great. Good to see you.
Hi, Greg.
Good evening, Alan, and thank you again for being on our show last Thursday. You really wowed the audience.
I really enjoyed it. Thank you for having me.
Well, speaking of wow, there are things happening out there that are wowing us, but not necessarily in a good way. There's just been an expose of collaboration between the Southern Poverty Law Center, an alleged not-for-profit private group, and the Department of Justice. Of course, the Southern Poverty Law Center has focused on who is and who is not a terrorist, who is and who is not an extremist, who is and who is not a potential source for problems. They've been doing it for many years. The guy that runs it, I think his name is Tues, but at any rate, he's a pervert, which is not atypical for people on the left. And that was all exposed by his ex-wife. I think he's now living with a chimpanzee. But at any rate, the fact is the Southern Poverty Law Center has designated a number of individuals, including me, as being terrorists. And it has gotten lots of money from lots of sources. And now we find out they're also getting money from the government. And yet they've always been quoted as an authority, expert, not related to anyone, no axe to grind. And now it's all kind of coming out. Alan, have you had any experience with the Southern Poverty Law Center?
Not that I recall personally, to tell you the truth. I've read a lot about them, and of course, what they have been doing, which is to try to say that anybody who isn't a kind of Marxist leftist like them is automatically a terrorist suspect. What is really appalling, though, Stan, is not what the Southern Poverty Law Center has tried to do. It's that understanding of things has now become the basis for what I can only call indoctrination at West Point, and for police and other folks who are exposed to the federal government, going so far that, as I think I mentioned last week or last time I was on, they had in this supposed study that was done or for teaching at West Point, the notion that if you are somebody who thinks of yourself as loyal to the Constitution, as a defender of individual rights, much less as pro-life and pro-Second Amendment or pro-marriage, then you are a terrorist suspect. And I often try to caution people when I mention these things that when you have a government collaborating with the Southern Poverty Law Center to decide who's a terrorist and who's not, then the fact that you hand power to somebody in the executive branch or in the Oval Office to decide who's a terrorist is very dangerous, because they're going to point the finger at all these people who disagree with their degradation of America's constitutional system, of America's moral life, and they're going to say, if you're opposing that, then you're automatically a suspect. And that's a very dangerous situation.
Well, anytime you deal with, let's not make this a personal attack on Morris Dees, but I know the man, and I can tell you that he is the quintessential perfect leftist in that they start with what they want, and if you're not what they want, then they find a way or a reason or make up a way or a reason to label you in a way that will hurt you, destroy you, or even get you killed. And that's not unusual on the left. Now, Greg, let me get you in this conversation, because isn't the Southern Poverty Law Center down there in Alabama?
Yeah, Montgomery. And that's one of the things that's always bothered me about this. When it first started, this was, of course, a project which had noble aims, because far too many black men were ending up on death row as proportion to white men. And any person of conscience would look at this and go, something just isn't right here. And so, you know, many of us of good conscience felt that, hey, this is something that would be worthwhile. Now, I have been watching recently on the military channel a series of shows on Nazi collaborators. And as a result, no, I'm not saying that we are yet in the throes of a Nazi-type regime, but I think that we are rapidly heading there. I'm watching very closely these quasi-governmental groups and other groups like Southern Poverty Law Center become very much like the Nazi collaborators of old, in that they are now working hand in hand with the government to point out, see, there's an enemy of the state over there. See, there's an enemy of the state over there. And this bothers me a great deal when you put this kind of power in the hands of individuals who are not checked in any way by any government reform, by government power. Police officers, in at least some form, are checked and balanced by courts in what they do, but civilians have no such controls over their behavior. Neither do they have any control over their ideological reasons for putting people on the enemy's list. So I find this to be a very disturbing turn of events when government, and this is not the only group that they're working with, but this is one that's making a lot of splash right now. When the government starts turning to these groups to say, help us find out who the enemies of the state are, that is a very dangerous turn of events.
Chief?
Well, the first thing is the left has proven that they will lie, cheat, steal, or murder to get their way. They have no objection or no morals with that at all. The second thing is I hear people on the right constantly saying, well, don't they get it? Well, yeah, they get it. They just have a totally different philosophy than we do. It's a totally different way of thinking. They're not missing it. They're doing what they want to do. And so if we look at how Barack Obama and Eric Holder, for example, think about terrorists, let's take the Islamic terrorists, for example. They don't consider them terrorists. They consider them freedom fighters fighting the colonial oppressive governments that have taken over their countries. But what they consider terrorists are people like us who are trying to maintain freedom and not allow a social government to take hold in this country. We're the problem in their eyes. They're not going to change that way of thinking. We're not going to change that way of thinking. They are the enemy. We must fight them and defeat them.
All right, Alan, this expose of the Southern Poverty Law Center, SPLC, I guess, is but a speck on this panoramic view of how government, and not just Democrats, certainly Republicans as well, will work in a less than honest way, let's put it that way, to accomplish their objectives. Now, you have talked and blogged and written and sermonized, if you will, about how we have a ruling elite in this country that want this country rearranged so that you have them and the rest of us, and we have nothing, no upside and no alternative but to do what they need to have done so that they can live the life they want to live. Can you kind of tie these two things together?
Well, Stan, I think we just have to think of it in terms of what has been, or what was, the historic reality before the United States of America was founded. The most common form of government everywhere on earth was government of the many by the few. sometimes through the focal point of an absolute monarch, but always present in that form of government by the few is some kind of elitist nobility, aristocracy, oligarchy, call it by whatever name you want. People who are where they are on account of they have the land and they have the military instruments and they have the power, or they were born into these positions, and nobody else gets to have a say. That's the way governments were. And if they liked you and patronized you, then you might have a reasonably decent life. And if they didn't, they could stomp all over you and you didn't have much recourse. Now, the United States of America was founded in explicit denial of the legitimacy of that form of government, in order to affirm the notion that government of, by, and for the people, where folks are respected in their individual rights, have a chance to participate in selecting who's going to make the laws, and have the expectation that the critical laws, including those that govern things like money and taxes, as well as decisions on war and peace, that those kinds of decisions by the government will take account of the will of the people. I think what we now see is just a restoration of the old way of doing things. We get so used to talking in terms of isms, right? Communism, Nazism. I think in terms of the historic reality of the horrors associated with those regimes, it's good to keep them in mind. But in terms of the phenomenon we're dealing with, it's not a particular product of the 20th century. It just got worse, more consolidated, more brutal, more massive in its atrocities. The simple fact of the matter is that government of the many, by the few, with no regard for law or justice, has been the common a sort of experience of mankind for as long as human beings have recorded history. And that's what made America exceptional. That was the break with the past that we truly represented. And what irks me is that we have these people masquerading as progressives and talking about how they're going to do justice and all they're doing is returning us to that same old way of doing things that led to abuses and oppression throughout human history. There's never been such a form of government that didn't go bad. Because as our founders understood, and as folks have known, and as even in the Bible you learn, there is an inclination in human nature that when you put power in people's hands without any rules, guidance, conscience, reverence for God, respect for decency and justice, they will abuse it, and given the chance, they'll abuse it in ways that go beyond imagining in terms of the horrors that result. We saw that in the 20th century. So the big question is, Stan, how come after going through what was the, I think, final proof in the course of all those nasty, ugly, Nazi, communist, atrocious killing regimes that accounted for the deaths of scores of millions of human beings, how can we let ourselves surrender in America to anything that even remotely resembles a return to that kind of government? And yet that's what we're getting. And you say, why? One final thought, we're getting it because, as our founders recognized, and I often mention this, Hamilton gave a speech at the Constitutional Convention that wowed everybody who was there. They wrote about it in their memoirs and talked about it and so forth. Lasted for 6 hours or more. And the heart of it was to put the Constitution, the founding, in the context of refuting this kind of rule of the princes, as he called them, the few over the many. Just because you have outstanding ability, outstanding power, outstanding wealth, think you have outstanding birth, you are going to claim the right to lord it over other people. It was rejected as a way of life. And the fact that we are letting these people return us to it under the guise of some form of party dictatorship, socialist dictatorship, liberal dictatorship, I don't care what they call it. It's the same ugly mess. And it can only lead, as we're seeing, to a suspension of respect for basic rights, a suspension of due process, a suspension of respect for the idea that government doesn't get to abuse people just for the sake of the power of those who are in government. And that has inevitably resulted in horrors. And I think we need to stop this before we experience the horrors. We shouldn't wait and say, oh, the horrors are here, we better do something. We know they're coming, so why don't we get wise and do something about it? Because we have all the provisions in our way of life, in our Constitution, to stop it before it gets started. And we need to do so.
I couldn't agree with you more. Now, falling right in line with that is this whole story about Senator Menendez from New Jersey, who has made the classic claim, oh, I forgot, it fell through the cracks, I didn't remember, I didn't know the gun was loaded, when he took at least 4, maybe 5, maybe 6, or maybe 7 trips on this criminal's airplane. In one case, he went from Florida to New York or New Jersey, then to turn around and go to the Dominican Republic, so that people wouldn't know that that's where he was going. We've had both eyewitness and testimony from the people involved in some of the shenanigans he was involved in. And all of that may or may not be 100% or even 1% true. I don't really know. I wasn't there. But what is obvious is that all of this plethora of evidence and information, the major media simply will not cover it. And it's, even though, again, there are no saints on the other side, when you have people of the other party accused of dramatically less in the way of wrongdoing, there is a heartbeat that you cannot escape. I'll start with you, Greg.
Well, one of the things that is happening in this country is the rise of a princely or noble class or ruling class. And this did not happen immediately in England either. The concept of an all-powerful monarch was not suddenly birthed upon the British people at one time. It was a slowly gathering in its strength in that institution over there, and it is doing the same here, though I would say at a much faster speed than it did in their history. And Menendez and these senators and these congressmen and Obama himself and cabinet posts, etc., they are taking upon themselves the form and function of princes and nobles as opposed to public servants, and we are starting to see the end result of this. How dare you question me? Oh, it slipped my mind. Move along. We'll let the press ministers deal with that. We'll allow the propaganda of the press to simply push it aside from the public consciousness. It was not in this country until Thomas Paine wrote an argument against monarchy that people even considered any other form of government besides monarchy, and now we have a monarchy building in this country right before our very eyes at breakneck speed. Now, as Alan referred to a few minutes ago, scores of people died. Let's put a number on that. That is 290 million people died because of democide. That is death by government, corrupt governments, communism, totalitarianism, fascism, whatever ism you want to put behind it. We do not need that to happen here. We do not need an unaccountable ruling noble class in this country. We have a press that is not holding them accountable, and we have a people that is not holding them accountable. The power flows from we the people, and we have sat by and let them take it from us. We need to take it back.
Chief?
There are many tools used by law enforcement to detect deception when they're investigating crimes. One of those is language absolutes, which are true in every language the world over. And if anyone is accused of a wrongdoing in an open setting and they did not do it, they will always say, I did not do that. If they fail to make that exact comment, they did it. So when I read this story and read the response by Senator Menendez, he was asked about this accusation in an open forum. He said the accusers were anonymous, which means it's a proven fact, he did it. So that's bad enough, but the worst part about this is the elites on both sides don't care if he did it or not. They just care about the fact that the elites are in power, the elites can do what they want, and the other us little minions have to just accept it, and because we can be stepped on by the elitist, they can get away with this kind of atrocity.
Very interesting comment. Innocent people say, I am innocent. I did not do it. Guilty people say, I won't dignify those accusations with a response. Something like that.
Exactly.
Alan?
Well, Stan, I think that what we are witnessing is an evidence of what I think we've been seeing growing for years now, in terms of people who get into power in our government, fancy themselves to be part of this elite structure, and so forth. And that is that they're not accountable to the people. For a while, they pretended that they were going to be accountable under the law, to the Constitution and the laws, and now they're throwing that aside. And so we are, in effect, returning to the culture that characterized the abusive nobility. Nobility during periods when they were not being constrained by any sense of decency. Because after all, I mean, not every era and every rule by aristocrats was awful and oppressive. Usually, by the way, Stan, it was because it existed in the context of a religious understanding that constrained people within the confines of what was required by divine law and respect for it, and by the customs that grew out of that. Think about where we are now, though. They have used the claim of scientific thises and thats to emancipate themselves from any respect whatsoever for God and for the laws of God. Meanwhile, on the basis of the same kind of claim of scientific prowess, they are worshiping power, worshiping the results of that can be put into their hands in the way of technological advances, surveillance equipment, military instruments of war, and so forth and so on. I have often said to people, and I think it is true, that because of that combination of things, we will find that the 21st century, in terms of abuse, will make the 20th look like a dress rehearsal. Because by and large, it was a contest in the 20th century between people who still acknowledged God, saw the connection between God's law and respect for every human being and their dignity, and kept power confined within law. It was a fight, sometimes leading to great world wars, but the fight was waged. I think now we are seeing the result of this rebellion against God, really, in which now these people puff themselves up as if nothing is to be worshipped but their power and their status and their success, and they are free to do whatever they please as a result. Now, I say again that is totally contrary to and contradicts the reason for this country's establishment. It was established in the first place to put aside that form of government. But the key to putting it aside, Stan, was that it began with the premise that right, justice, lawfulness is determined by God. God determines what is right. Folks who are acting according to his will are not to be abused, not by individuals committing crimes and not by governments committing atrocities. Once you have taken away that understanding that it is not human power and success that rules, but God who makes the rules, then these people with power kind of feel emancipated from any need whatsoever to pay attention to the laws and the rules. And this was, by the way, predicted again by our founders. One of the premises, the things that Adams, Madison, others wrote about, was that under the Constitution, the people who make the laws and carry out the laws were to be subject to the laws. So they weren't going to be part on some special path that kept them from having to be subject to the same laws as everybody else. It started several decades ago, and you know this, Stan, where they started writing bills and laws that were imposing burdens on the people at large. But then they set up a system so that they and their special cronies and their staff and other people wouldn't be subject to the same burden. It has reached an obvious point with Obamacare, but it has been there with pension things and other kinds of things that have been going on. This is intolerable. It's a symptom of exactly what Stephen Gregg have talked about. And I think it's one of those things that ought to alert people, wake them up. And it ought to also shape their sense of what the policy moves are. Because one of the things we've got to do is we've got to make sure that we return to the understanding that the Constitution has to be respected. The laws made pursuant to it have to be respected. And that the people who are lifted up to be representatives, not rulers, but representatives, that they cannot exempt themselves from the requirements of that law. The attitude that they're taking now is that they can, even when it comes to abusing money, power, and individuals, they're going to exempt themselves. And that, by the way, is a recipe for turning government into a criminal enterprise.
All right, on that cautious note, I suppose, we will take a quick break, and when we come back, I want to talk about the Boy Scouts. To stay true or to not stay true. We'll be back. Hey, my name is Stan Solomon, and you know if I have something to say, I'll say it. And I'll only tell you the truth because I'm a Republican, not a Democrat. Democrats always lie. Republicans only lie half the time. I don't lie at all. This is the Fuel Mule. It's an extraordinary product that was developed by a friend of mine, an engineer, and it increases the fuel mileage on your vehicle. If you have a combustion engine, this will increase your mileage by 10 to 20%. It bolts around your fuel line. You can install it yourself or have your mechanic do it. It is an extraordinary item, and it flat works. I've been using it for more than 10 years. It's increased my mileage on every vehicle I put it on, and by the way, it will last forever. You can get rid of your vehicle, just take it off and put on the next one. Go to cpnlive.com. You'll have more information there. You can order it right there. We absolutely guarantee you'll be satisfied. The Fuel Mule. It's a way to kick down your cost of fuel and kick up your mileage. Don't you love the name? I thought of it. The Fuel Mule. Do you like being healthy? I do. In fact, this product, which I've been taking for years now, is absolutely the answer. Now, you may not believe it, but I'm actually 21, plus tax, of course. This product has 146 different healthful nutrients in it, and it's liquid, so it's bioavailable. It tastes great, and it's sugar-free. 1 ounce of Sonic Life each day will help you to maintain and enhance your health. It's a kind of a gift, well, that you'll thank your mom for, your husband for, your wife for, your kids for. Whoever you give it to, they're going to say thank you, and you are going to enjoy the benefits of having all the vitamins, all the minerals, all the nutrients your body needs in one very reasonably priced product. Just go to cpnlive.com, and everything's right there. You'll be able to read all the ingredients. The price is right there, a flat price delivered to your door anywhere in the United States of America. Sonic Life is a gift, a great gift. Give it to yourself. I do. You have a computer, if you're alive today, which means you have a hard drive, which means it's going to break down. Mosey, the backup people, for thousands, for Stan, for thousands of people, for tens of thousands of people, is simply common sense. You go to cpnlive.com, click on the icon for Mosey, the backup people, and sign up. It's just a few dollars a month. Let me tell you something. We had a break-in. They stole our whole computer. You know what? When they take the computer, you can't recover anything, but we had Mosey. We had the backup. We were able to restore everything simply by buying another computer. cpnlive.com, click on the icon for Mosey, the backup people, and give yourself common sense, peace of mind, great value, the best thing you've ever done. Sooner or later, it's going to be Mosey, the backup people. Do you like being healthy? I do. In fact, this product, which I've been taking for years now, is absolutely the answer. Now, you may not believe it, but I'm actually 21, plus tax, of course. This product has 146 different healthful nutrients in it, and it's liquid, so it's bioavailable. It tastes great, and it's sugar-free. 1 ounce of Sonic Life each day will help you to maintain and enhance your health. It's a kind of a gift, well, that you'll thank your mom for, your husband for, your wife for, your kids for. Whoever you give it to, they're going to say thank you, and you are going to enjoy the benefits of having all the vitamins, all the minerals, all the nutrients your body needs in one very reasonably priced product. Just go to cpnlive.com and everything's right there. You'll be able to read all the ingredients. The price is right there, a flat price delivered to your door anywhere in the United States of America. Sonic Life is a gift, a great gift. Give it to yourself. I do.